Do you know where Sophie is right now? Those 8 words, spoken by a 12-year-old homeless girl to a man 3 times her size, would trigger the fastest chapter mobilization Clover Hollow, Kentucky had ever seen. For 11 days, Wendell Ray Pruitt had been moving an 8-year-old girl away from her grandfather's sight. 11 days of gifts wrapped in secrets. 11 days of building trust that would destroy her. But what this licensed foster care coordinator didn't know was that someone had been watching him the entire time. Someone the system had taught to be invisible. Someone who'd learned, the hardest way a child can learn, exactly what a predator looks like when he's hunting. This is Faye and Sophie's story, and the part that changes everything is the part nobody saw coming. If you believe every child deserves someone who answers when they speak, subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. And tell me what city you're watching from, because by the end, you'll understand why that matters. Now, back to that fairground on a Saturday afternoon in October, when a girl with nothing but a pencil and a notebook decided she was done being ignored. The Clover Hollow Community Fair smelled like fried dough and diesel exhaust, and autumn leaves turning to mulch under 1,000 boots. It was the kind of place where families came for caramel apples and ring toss games, and the illusion that small-town Kentucky was still the safest place on earth to raise your kids. Music played from a speaker system that crackled every third measure. Children shrieked on carnival rides that had been assembled that morning by men who moved from county to county, setting up temporary joy, and then disappearing before anyone noticed the rust. Gideon Tombstone Mercer sat alone on a hay bale near the food area, eating a pulled pork sandwich that was better than it had any right to be. He was 58 years old, 6'2", 228 pounds, with a silver-threaded beard and crow's feet etched deep around gray eyes that had seen more than most men his age. Both forearms were tattooed solid, no individual designs visible anymore, just history written in ink that had faded from black to blue-gray over 3 decades. His leather cut bore the president's patch for the Clover Hollow chapter. 11 years he'd worn it. 11 years of keeping his brothers in line and his community safer than most people realized. He wasn't watching the crowd the way a nervous man watches a crowd. He was watching the way a man watches when watching is what keeps people alive. His granddaughter Sophie was 30 yards away at the ring toss booth, laughing at something the volunteer running the game had said. She was 8 years old, light brown hair in 2 braids with yellow ribbons, the color her grandmother had loved before the cancer took her 2 winters back. Sophie wore a yellow sundress with white buttons, slightly faded from being washed too many times, and white sandals with a small scuff on the left toe. Her purple backpack with the unicorn iron-on patch hung from one shoulder, zipper half open the way it always was. She was fine. She was in sight. She was safe. Gideon took another bite of his sandwich, and that's when the girl appeared. She didn't run. Running draws attention, and attention, judging by the way she moved, was something this girl had learned to avoid. She walked with the kind of deliberate quiet that comes from years of making yourself small enough to survive. Her boots were too big. She adjusted her stride so they didn't slap the grass. In her right hand, a pencil, worn down to 2 inches, held like someone who'd had nothing else to hold on to for a very long time. Against her chest, a notebook, pressed tight like a shield. She was 12, maybe. Dark auburn hair, rough cut with scissors and no mirror. Oversized gray hoodie. Dark jeans fraying at both knees. Scuffed hiking boots laced twice around her ankles to keep them from falling off. She stopped 4 feet from where Gideon sat, just outside arm's reach, trained distance. Her face. That's what made Gideon put down his sandwich. He'd worked Child Protective Services intake for 6 years in Harlan County before he quit in disgust. He'd processed 407 cases. He knew the face. Hypervigilant, but controlled. Eyes that scanned a room in 4 seconds and logged exits, threats, neutrals. This wasn't anxiety. This was precision. There was a difference. "Do you know where Sophie is right now?" the girl asked. Her voice didn't shake. That was the thing that landed. She was asking a question she already knew the answer to. She was asking him to discover that he didn't. Gideon turned from Sophie's direction toward the girl's face. He read her in 3 seconds. The clothes, the pencil, the breathing, measured, like someone who'd learned that visible fear was a liability. He put down his sandwich. That was all. He just put it down and gave her his full attention. "Tell me what you know," he said. 5 words. Not "who are you?" Not "calm down." Not "are you sure?" Just, "Tell me what you know." Because he could see that she knew something. The girl unfolded a piece of paper from her hoodie pocket. It was torn from a church bulletin. He could see the Millard Creek Baptist logo in faded blue ink along one edge. The paper had been folded into eighths, soft from being handled many times. When she smoothed it flat on the hay bale beside him, Gideon saw pencil marks, dark, pressed hard. It was a map, hand-drawn. The fairgrounds laid out in rough but accurate detail. Location labels in careful print, equipment shed, playground, main stage, restrooms, food area, and timestamps. 2:15 p.m. W takes S behind shed. 2 minutes 3:40 p.m. W gives S yellow clip private. NE corner booth 4:02 p.m. W touches S hair. S pulls away, but smiles after. There was a small stick figure labeled S with arrows and more timestamps. And in the margin, 3 words circled hard enough that the pencil had nearly torn through. Alone. Gift. Secret. Gideon's jaw tightened. "He's been moving Sophie away from you," the girl said. Her words came fast now, like she'd been holding them too long. "Every day for 11 days. Always when you're busy. Always just for a minute. He's given her 7 gifts. I counted. She's starting to protect him. She uses his pet name for her when you're not listening. Wendy's little helper. That's not her protecting herself. That's her protecting him." Gideon looked at the map, then at the girl, then at Sophie, still laughing at the ring toss booth, still safe, still visible. "Who are you?" he asked. "Faye Decker," she said. Then quieter. "Nobody, mostly." "You're not nobody if you made this." He tapped the map. "How long have you been watching?" 3 days. I sleep at the Millard Creek Church shelter when they have a bed. I come here during the day because it's warm and there's people, and sometimes the food vendors give me what they're gonna throw out anyway." She swallowed. "I've seen this before. What he's doing. I know what it looks like." There was something in the way she said that last part. Something that made Gideon's chest feel heavy. "Seen it where?" he asked, even though he suspected he knew. Faye looked at her boots. "The Decker home. Barberville. 8 months in that placement. I reported it. Nobody believed me. I ran." Gideon had worked intake long enough to know what ran from placement meant. It meant the system had failed this girl so badly that homelessness felt safer. "How old are you?" he asked. 12. 12 years old, sleeping in a church shelter, mapping a predator's movements for 3 days because no adult would listen. "You tried to tell someone before you came to me," Gideon said. It wasn't a question. Faye nodded. 4 people. Fair security volunteer said the man in the green polo was on the approved list. A mother told me he was a saint and called security on me. A deputy asked for my ID and guardian's name. I didn't have either, so he tried to take me in. I ran. and 2 men in orange vests from the neighborhood watch told me the predator was the one who organized the safety committee. Her voice cracked, just slightly. I knew that was possible, knowing it didn't make it hurt less. Gideon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. He didn't stand. Standing would make him tower over her. He kept himself at eye level, as close as a 6'2" man could manage. "What's his name?" Gideon asked. "Wendell Pruitt. He's wearing a green polo. County Fair Committee Chair. He volunteers with the church youth program. Sophie goes to his Tuesday afternoon reading circle." Gideon's stomach dropped. He knew exactly who she was talking about. Wendell Pruitt, licensed foster care coordinator for Harlan County Social Services, scout troop leader, food bank board member, the man who'd personally recommended the community fair as a safe family event. The man Gideon had thanked last month for organizing it. The man he'd trusted. "I have more," Faye said. She pulled a small voice recorder from inside her left boot. The housing was cracked, but the device was functional. "I found this at the library lost and found 6 weeks ago. I pressed record when I heard him on his phone 2 days ago, behind the equipment shed. He didn't know I was there." She pressed play. The recording was scratchy, but clear enough. Wendell's voice came through, calm and measured. "The grandfather's with his chapter all of Saturday afternoon, 4 hours minimum." A pause. Then, "I like to take my time with the right ones. 3-4 weeks. No rush." Another pause. "The placement money isn't the point this time. Some things are about something else." Then, after a longer silence, "Tommy wasn't patient enough. That's why it went the way it did. I learned from that." A second voice, faint. "And if she tells him?" Wendell, "She won't. They never do once they understand how much they'd hurt everyone they love." The recording ended. Gideon sat very still. The fairground noise continued around him. Children laughing, music crackling, vendors calling out. But it all felt very far away. "Tommy," he said quietly. "Tommy Harkins." Faye nodded. "I looked him up at the library. 14 years old. Drowned in Clover Creek, June 2021. Accidental, they said. But he was Wendell's ward, and Wendell got $89,000 from the Criminal Injury Compensation Fund after Tommy died." Gideon's hands curled into fists on his knees. Tommy Harkins. He remembered that case. Remembered thinking at the time that something felt wrong. A 14-year-old boy who'd lived in group homes and foster placements his whole life, finally placed with a licensed coordinator who everyone said was doing good work. And then, 3 weeks before, Tommy was supposed to testify at some kind of school meeting, drowned, alone, no witnesses. The investigation had closed in 4 days. Accidental death, no signs of foul play. Wendell had been at a county board meeting when it happened. Alibi confirmed. But Tommy had died, 200 yards from a property Wendell used for youth retreats. "How long do we have?" Gideon asked. Faye looked at her notebook. 43 minutes. He told Sophie he needs help setting up sound equipment in the community center at 4:30. The fair ends at 6. Your chapter meeting runs until 5:45. He has 75 minutes alone with her if nobody stops him. Gideon stood. He took the recorder from Faye's hand, gently, like it was evidence, because it was. His radio was already in his other hand. "Nobody touches that girl," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made Faye's shoulders drop half an inch. "And nobody touches you. You're with me now. Both of you." He didn't put a hand on her shoulder. Instead, he stepped so that he was between her and the direction of the fair, the way a person stands between something and wind. Faye noticed. She didn't say anything. She kept the pencil in her hand. Gideon keyed his radio. "Crowbar, it's Tombstone." The response came in 2 seconds. "Go ahead." "I need every brother within 20 miles at the Clover Hollow Fair. Now." There was a pause, just long enough for gravity to settle. "What's going on?" Crowbar's voice, steady but alert. "A licensed predator's been grooming my granddaughter for 11 days. We've got 40 minutes before he has her alone. We're not waiting for the county to take their time on this one." "Say no more. We're coming." The line went dead. And that was it. No questions about proof or evidence. No concerns about legal complications. Just, "We're coming." Because that's what Brotherhood meant. Gideon looked at Faye. "You did the right thing. You understand that? 4 adults turned you away and you kept going. That's not just brave. That's the thing that saves lives." Faye's eyes went wet, but she didn't cry. She just nodded. "Now," Gideon said, "I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning. And don't leave anything out. Now you might be thinking, a Hell's Angel finds out his granddaughter's been targeted, and his first move is to make a phone call and listen to a homeless girl's testimony. That's not the story you expected, is it? Maybe years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. Fists first. Questions never. Rage as the only response to a threat against family. But Gideon Mercer had learned something in his 6 years working CPS intake, something he'd carried with him every day since. The loudest response isn't always the most effective one. And if you want to protect a child, not just today, but tomorrow and next year and 10 years from now, you need evidence that holds up in court. You need a case that doesn't fall apart the second a defense attorney starts poking holes. You need to be smarter than the predator, and you need to be patient enough to do it right. That's what separated the Hell's Angels of Clover Hollow from the stereotype. They'd learned, through decades of protecting their own communities, that real protection wasn't about performance. It was about precision. Faye sat on the hay bale beside Gideon and opened her notebook. The pages were filled with cramped handwriting, observations logged in chronological order, times noted down to the minute. "Day 1 was Tuesday," she said. "I was at the library when Sophie came in for the reading circle. Wendell runs it every Tuesday from 3 to 4:30. I'd seen him before. Always around kids, always smiling, always helpful. But something felt wrong. The way he positioned himself, always between the kids and the door, always touching, just a hand on the shoulder, adjusting a book, fixing hair. Small things, things people dismiss." Gideon listened without interrupting. "I started watching closer," Faye continued. "That's when I saw the gifts. Tuesday after the reading circle, he gave Sophie a bookmark. Said it was because she'd read the most pages that week. Wednesday at the park, he gave her a bracelet. 'Our secret,' he told her. 'Don't want the other kids to feel left out.' Thursday, a hair clip. Friday, a little stuffed bear. By Saturday, yesterday, she had 6 gifts. Today makes 7. "What did you see today?" Gideon asked. "A yellow hair clip. Left braid. It wasn't there 20 minutes before she walked past his booth. When you asked her about it later, she said she found it. But I saw him give it to her, and I saw her pull her backpack tighter when you asked. That's conditioning. She's protecting the secret because he's taught her the secret is what makes her special." Gideon's jaw worked. "What else?" Faye flipped a page. "He knows your schedule. He told someone on the phone that your chapter meets Saturday afternoons, 4 hours minimum. He knows when you're occupied. And he's been engineering moments alone with Sophie during those windows. Never long. 5 minutes here, 3 minutes there. Just enough to build trust. Just enough to make her feel like he's the one who really sees her." "And the recording," Gideon said. "When did you make that?" "Tuesday, 4:17 p.m. I was behind the equipment shed at the church. He was on his phone by his van. I'd been watching his van for 90 minutes because that's where he keeps things. The back windows are tinted. He leans against it when he makes calls he doesn't want overheard. What's in the van? Gideon asked. I don't know. I couldn't get close enough. But whatever it is, he checks it before and after every interaction with a child, like he's confirming something's still there. Gideon looked at Faye. Really looked at her. 12 years old, homeless, failed by every system designed to protect her. And she'd spent 3 days building a case against a man with credentials and community standing because she knew, from experience, exactly what he was. You said you've seen this before, Gideon said quietly. At the Decker home. Faye's hands tightened on her notebook. Mr. Decker was a deacon. Everyone loved him. He fostered 6 kids over 4 years. I was number 5. He did the same thing Wendell's doing. Gifts, secrets, special privileges. By the time I figured out what was happening, he'd already moved on to another girl in the house. I tried to tell my caseworker. She said I was troubled, adjusting poorly, making up stories for attention. Faye's voice went flat. I ran because staying meant waiting for him to decide I was useful again. Where's the caseworker now? Gideon asked. I don't know. I stopped existing to the system the day I ran. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then, you exist to me. And you existed to Sophie the second you decided she mattered more than staying invisible. That's not nothing, Faye. That's everything. Faye looked at him. Her eyes were still wet, but her voice was steady. You believe me? Every word. Why? Because I've read 407 case files that started exactly like this. And I know what happens when people decide not to believe. Gideon stood. We've got 36 minutes before Wendell expects to have Sophie alone. Here's what's going to happen. My brothers are on their way. We're going to find Wendell. We're going to secure Sophie. And we're going to make sure he never gets close to another child again. But I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Faye nodded. Good, because you're the key witness. Your map, your recording, your testimony. That's what builds the case. And when this goes to court, you're going to be the reason he doesn't walk away. The rumble started low, distant, like thunder on the horizon. Then it grew. 4 motorcycles, then 8, then 12. The sound of Harley-Davidson engines roaring in unison, chrome gleaming under the October sun, leather cuts bearing the same insignia. They rolled into the overflow parking lot in tight formation, disciplined, practiced, the coordinated efficiency of men who'd ridden together for years. By the time the engines cut off, 23 brothers stood in the lot. More were coming. Gideon could hear them in the distance. Crowbar was the first to reach him. 52 years old, former Harlan County Sheriff's deputy with 17 years on the job before he hung up the badge. He knew every judge, every filing process, every legal lever in 3 counties. He was the man you called when you needed to navigate the system without breaking it. Talk to me, Crowbar said. Gideon handed him the recorder and the map. Wendell Pruitt, licensed foster care coordinator. He's been grooming my granddaughter for 11 days. This girl, he nodded toward Faye, has been tracking him for 3 days. She's got documentation, recordings, and a witness statement. We've got 32 minutes before he has Sophie alone in the community center. Crowbar looked at the map. Pressed play on the recorder. His face went hard. Tommy Harkins, he said quietly. You remember him? I remember the case closed too fast. I remember thinking something was off. Crowbar looked at Faye. You made this map? Faye nodded. You're a hell of a detective, kid. He looked at Gideon. What's the play? We secure Sophie. We find Wendell. We hold him until law enforcement arrives. And we document everything so there's no question about what happened here. Halftone appeared next. 44 years old, former Army Signal Corps, communication and surveillance specialist. He carried a small duffel bag that Gideon knew contained recording equipment, cameras, and everything needed to document an operation. "Need me to set up?" Halftone asked. "2 camera setup," Gideon said. "One on the community center entrance, one on Wendell's van. I want a record of every move." "Done." Cinder walked up. 61, retired social worker from Knox County, with 22 years in the field. He'd worked alongside Wendell briefly in 2017. Always thought something was off, but couldn't name it then. Could now. "Wendell Pruitt," Cinder said, shaking his head. "I worked a case with him 6 years ago. There was a placement that didn't sit right. Kid said things. Wendell explained them away. Clean record, credentials, community standing. I convinced myself I was seeing shadows." He looked at Gideon. "I should have trusted my gut." "You're trusting it now," Gideon said. "That's what matters." Razorback jogged over. 38, youngest brother in the chapter. Tech savvy, managed the chapter's media presence. He pulled out his phone. "I'm setting up a live stream. Public record. If this goes sideways, we've got documentation that we did everything by the book." "Good," Gideon said. "But keep Sophie's face out of frame. She's a minor." "Understood." The last to arrive was Gravel, 67 years old, chapter co-founder, former Marine, Korean War-era family, the elder statesman. When Gravel spoke, people listened, especially the older folks in Clover Hollow, who remembered when the chapter first formed and started looking out for the community. "What do you need from me?" Gravel asked. "Crowd control," Gideon said. "People are going to see 23 bikers converge on a community fair. They're going to panic. I need you to talk to the older attendees, the ones who know us, the ones who will listen. Keep them calm. Let them know this isn't chaos. This is protection." Gravel nodded. "Consider it done." Gideon looked at his brothers. 23 men, more arriving every minute, all of them ready, all of them waiting for the word. "Here's what we know," Gideon said. "Wendell Pruitt is a licensed predator. He's got community standing, credentials, and a network that protects him. He's been grooming Sophie for 11 days. He's done this before. Tommy Harkins, 2021, drowned under suspicious circumstances. Wendell collected $89,000 in compensation. He's escalating. We've got 28 minutes before he has Sophie alone in that community center." He held up the recorder. "We've got evidence. We've got a witness. We've got a case. What we don't have is time. So here's the play. Crowbar, you coordinate with law enforcement. Make the call. Get units rolling. Halftone. Set up surveillance. Cinder, you're with me when we talk to Wendell. You know his file. You know how he operates. Razorback, document everything. Gravel, crowd management. The rest of you. I need eyes on every exit. Nobody leaves this fair without us knowing. And I need someone watching Wendell's van. If there's evidence in that vehicle, it doesn't disappear." "And Sophie?" Crowbar asked. "I'm getting her now," Gideon said. "Faye, you're coming with me." Gideon walked toward the ring toss booth with Faye at his side. He didn't hurry. Hurrying would draw attention, and right now, the most important thing was appearing normal. Just a grandfather checking on his granddaughter. Just another fairgoer enjoying a Saturday afternoon. Sophie saw him coming and waved. Her face was bright, happy, completely unaware. "Grandpa, I almost won. Mr. Wendell said I just need one more try." "Sophie," Gideon said gently. He crouched down to her level. "I need you to come with me for a minute, sweetheart. But I'm in the middle of—" "Now, Sophie." Something in his voice made her stop. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something in his face that made her small hand reach for his without another word. "Okay, Grandpa." Gideon stood, keeping Sophie's hand in his. He looked at the volunteer running the booth, a teenager, maybe 19, wearing a volunteer badge and looking confused. "Where's Wendell Pruitt?" Gideon asked. The kid pointed. "Over by the equipment shed. He's setting up for the sound check in the community center." "Thank you." Gideon walked Sophie and Faye back toward where his brothers were gathering. Sophie noticed them now. 23 men in leather cuts, standing in formation near the overflow lot. More motorcycles were still arriving, their engines cutting the autumn air like thunder rolling in from the hills. "Grandpa, what's happening?" Sophie asked. Her voice was small now, uncertain. Gideon knelt again, eye level. "Sophie, I need you to stay with Crowbar for a little while. You remember Crowbar? He's going to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "From someone who's been lying to you. Someone who's been giving you gifts and telling you their secrets." Sophie's face went very still. Her hand moved to her backpack strap. Protective. Exactly the way Faye had described. "Mr. Wendell?" Sophie whispered. "Yes, baby. Mr. Wendell." "But he's nice. He said I was special. He said—" "I know what he said." Gideon's voice was gentle but firm. "And none of it was true. The gifts weren't because you're special. They were because he wanted you to keep secrets from me. Do you understand?" Sophie's eyes filled with tears, not because she was scared, because she was starting to understand that someone she'd trusted had been using her. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice breaking. "You didn't," Gideon said. "Not one single thing. This is not your fault. Do you hear me? Not your fault." Sophie nodded, tears spilling over. Gideon looked at Faye. "This is Faye. She's the one who saw what was happening. She's the one who came to find me. She's the reason you're safe right now." Sophie looked at Faye. Faye looked back. 2 girls. 8 years between them. A lifetime of difference in what they'd survived. But in that moment, something passed between them. An understanding that didn't need words. "Thank you," Sophie whispered. Faye nodded. "You're going to be okay." Crowbar stepped forward. "I've got her tombstone. Nobody gets near her." Gideon handed Sophie to Crowbar's care, then turned to face the fairground. His brothers were in position now. 38 men from the Clover Hollow chapter, 61 from Hazard, 46 from Pikeville, 145 Hells Angels standing in formation, silent and still. The crowd had noticed. People were stopping, staring. A few were pulling out phones. Parents were gathering their children closer. The same parents who'd seen these men around town for years, who'd waved to them at the gas station, who'd watched them organize charity rides and food drives. They were suddenly remembering every stereotype they'd ever heard about motorcycle clubs. Dangerous, violent, lawless. Gideon could see it in their faces. You might be imagining what happened next. 145 bikers roaring toward a community center, fists ready, chaos brewing. The kind of confrontation that ends in sirens and arrests and viral videos that confirm everything people already believed about men who wear leather and ride Harleys. And maybe, years ago, that's exactly what would have happened. But Gideon Mercer had learned something in his 58 years, something he'd tried to teach every brother who'd ever worn the Clover Hollow patch. Real strength isn't loud. Real strength doesn't perform. Real strength is the discipline to do what's necessary without becoming the villain in someone else's story. That's what separated them. Not the motorcycles, not the leather, the choice to be better than what people expected. Gravel walked toward the crowd, gathering near the food area. He moved slowly, deliberately, his hands visible, his expression calm. At 67, he'd earned the kind of face that made people listen, lined with years, steady with experience. He stopped in front of a group of older fairgoers, people he'd known for decades. "Folks," he said, his voice carrying without being loud. "I know what this looks like. I know what you're thinking. But I need you to trust me for the next 30 minutes. We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to stop it." A woman in her 60s, Paulette Owens, a teacher at Millard Creek Elementary, stepped forward. "What's going on, Gravel?" "Wendell Pruitt," Gravel said simply. Paulette's face went pale. "What about him?" "He's been grooming a child. We have evidence. Law enforcement is on the way, but we're not waiting for him to have another opportunity." Gravel looked around at the gathered crowd. "Some of you have known me for 40 years. You know I don't lie. You know I don't exaggerate. So when I tell you that what we're about to do is necessary, I need you to believe me." Paulette was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I filed a complaint about Wendell 14 months ago. I reported unusual attention toward a 9-year-old student. The complaint went to his own department. Case closed in 6 days." Her voice shook. "I should have pushed harder." "You did what you could within the system," Gravel said. "The system failed. That's not on you." But the look on Paulette's face said she didn't quite believe that. The guilt of seeing something and not stopping it, that weight didn't disappear just because someone told you it wasn't your fault. Wendell Pruitt was behind the equipment shed, exactly where the volunteer had said. He was checking cables, sorting microphone stands, humming something under his breath. He looked up when Gideon and Cinder approached. His expression shifted immediately. Friendly, open, professionally warm. The mask sliding into place so smoothly it was almost invisible. "Gideon," Wendell said, extending a hand. "Everything okay?" Gideon didn't take the hand. "We need to talk." Wendell's smile faltered for just a second. Then it reset. "Of course. What's this about?" "Sophie." Wendell's head tilted, the picture of concerned confusion. "Is she all right? I saw her at the ring toss earlier. She seemed happy." "She was," Gideon said. "Until I explained that the 7 gifts you've given her over the past 11 days weren't gifts. They were grooming." The word landed like a stone. Wendell's face went through 3 expressions in 2 seconds. Shock, hurt, then carefully constructed reasonableness. This was phase 1. The charm offensive. His shoulders dropped from defensive to relaxed, a practice move. His hands opened, palms up, a rehearsed surrender gesture. His head tilted slightly, an approachability signal. "Gideon, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Wendell said. His voice was measured, calm. The voice of a man who'd talked his way out of trouble before. "I've been volunteering with the church youth program for 6 years. Sophie comes to my reading circle. I give bookmarks and small prizes to encourage participation. That's not grooming. That's mentorship." "The gifts were private," Gideon said. "You told her they were secrets. Don't want the other kids to feel left out." "That's what you said. Word for word." Wendell's smile stayed in place, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Children exaggerate. They misinterpret. I would never—" "You told someone on the phone that you had 4 hours on Saturday while I was with my chapter," Gideon interrupted. "You said you like to take your time with the right ones. 3-4 weeks. No rush." The smile dropped. "I don't know what you think you heard." "I didn't hear it," Gideon said. "Someone else did. Someone who's been watching you for 3 days. Someone who documented your movements, your timeline, your pattern." Wendell's expression shifted again. The charm was gone. Now came phase 2, the legal threat. "You're holding me here against my will," Wendell said, his voice cooling. "That's false imprisonment. I'm a licensed county official. I have a relationship with the sheriff's department. My attorney will bury this club in litigation. You'll lose your charter." He waited for a reaction, a flinch, a look between the two men that said they were reconsidering. Nothing. Gideon just watched him. Cinder stood silent beside him, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You're welcome to call your attorney," Gideon said quietly. "The FBI is going to want to talk to them anyway." The word FBI landed. Wendell's face changed. This was the first moment he understood the scale. "FBI?" Wendell said. His voice was quieter now. "This is insane. I'm a foster care coordinator. I've dedicated my life to helping children. I've worked with families in this county for 11 years. I think I know what I'm looking at." Phase 3. The appeal to sympathy. "This is a witch hunt," Wendell continued. "I've sacrificed everything for this community. I organize the fair. I manage the benevolence fund. I've placed dozens of children in safe homes. And this is how I'm repaid. Accusations based on what? A misunderstanding? A child's confusion? I'm the victim here." Gideon leaned in slightly. His voice was very quiet, very calm. "I'm not interested in your reasons. Neither is she." 5 words. That was all. And that's when Wendell broke. Phase 4. The unraveling. His shoulders dropped. Not a performance this time. Just the collapse of a man whose strategies had all failed. His hands, which had been open and placating, curled into fists. His eyes went to the ground. And then he said it. One honest sentence that escaped before he could stop it. "I was careful. I was so careful." The mask was off. Cinder stepped forward. "Wendell Pruitt, I worked a case with you 6 years ago. Placement for a boy named Marcus. You told me the family was vetted. Address checked out on paper. But when I drove by 3 months later, the house was empty. No family. No Marcus. I asked you about it. You said he'd been transferred to another county. Adjustment disorder. Behavioral issues." Cinder's voice was hard now. "Where's Marcus, Wendell?" Wendell said nothing. "Tommy Harkins," Gideon said. "Your ward. Drowned in Clover Creek, June 2021. You collected $89,000 in criminal injury compensation. But Tommy had asked his school counselor for a private meeting 2 days before he died." What was he going to tell her? Wendell's jaw worked. "Tommy was troubled. He was 14, Gideon cut in. "And you had an insurance policy on him. $25,000, 4 months before he drowned." The fairground noise continued around them. Music, children, vendors, normal life. And in the space behind the equipment shed, a predator realized that the world he'd built and the world he'd destroyed was finally catching up to him. "I want my attorney," Wendell said. "You'll get one," Gideon said. "Right after the sheriff arrives." Halftone appeared from around the corner of the shed, camera in hand. "Got it all," he said. "Full recording, audio and video." Wendell's face went gray. 2 sheriff's deputies arrived 4 minutes later, called by Crowbar. They found Wendell standing between Gideon and Cinder, hands at his sides, looking at the ground. No violence, no chaos, just a man waiting to be arrested, surrounded by 145 witnesses who'd made sure there was no way for him to run. Deputy Harris, who'd worked with Crowbar for 7 years before Crowbar left the department, approached cautiously. He looked at Gideon. "What do we have?" Gideon handed him the recorder. "Evidence of grooming, admission of prior knowledge of a suspicious death, and a recording that references Tommy Harkins." Harris listened to the recording. His expression went from skeptical to grim. "We'll need the girl who made this," Harris said. "The witness. She's 12 years old. She's homeless. And she's terrified of being taken back into the system," Gideon said. "She stays with me until we can guarantee she's placed somewhere safe. Non-negotiable." Harris looked at Wendell, then at the 145 bikers standing in silent formation across the fairground, then back at Gideon. "I'll make the call," Harris said. He walked Wendell toward the patrol car. Weapons weren't drawn. Voices weren't raised. Wendell went quietly, like a man who'd run out of moves. But as Harris opened the back door of the cruiser, Wendell said something that made Harris pause. "Can someone call my neighbor about my mail?" Wendell asked. Quiet, almost absent. "I'm supposed to pick it up tomorrow." As if that were the thing that needed handling. As if the world he'd built, and the world he'd destroyed, could wait while he sorted out his correspondence. Harris didn't answer. He just guided Wendell into the car. Paulette Owens approached Gideon 20 minutes later. Her hands were shaking. "I need to tell you something," she said. 14 months ago, I filed a complaint about Wendell. I saw him with a 9-year-old student, touching her hair, giving her gifts, always finding reasons to be alone with her. I documented everything. I submitted it through proper channels. "What happened?" Gideon asked. "It went to the county social services office for review. Wendell's office. He reviewed his own complaint." Paulette's voice broke. The response came back in 6 days. No evidence of inappropriate conduct. Teacher encouraged to focus on classroom instruction rather than unfounded speculation. That's what it said. Word for word. I tried to push back. I was told that Wendell had an impeccable record, that my concerns were noted but unsubstantiated. "And the girl?" Gideon asked. "Transferred to a different school 3 months later. Family moved out of county. I don't know where she is now." Paulette looked at Gideon with red-rimmed eyes. "I saw it. I reported it. And nothing happened. How many children could I have saved if I'd just—" "You did everything right," Gideon said. "The system was designed to protect him, not children. That's not your failure. That's institutional rot." But Paulette shook her head. "I should have called someone else, gone to the state, gone to the press, anything." She wasn't wrong, and Gideon didn't insult her by pretending otherwise. "Tell the investigators everything you just told me," he said instead. "That's how you help now." Razorback approached with his phone. "I've got someone on the line who needs to talk to you. Says her name is Alicia Ferris. She was Tommy Harkins's foster sibling." Gideon took the phone. "Mr. Mercer?" a young woman's voice said. She sounded 16, maybe 17. "That's me. I heard you arrested Wendell Pruitt. Is that true?" "The sheriff arrested him. We just made sure he didn't leave before they got there." There was a long pause. Then, "Tommy tried to tell someone. He told me first. Said Wendell was doing things. Wrong things. I told him to tell his counselor. He had a meeting scheduled for June 16th. He drowned on June 14th. Gideon's chest felt heavy. "Did you tell anyone?" "I told my caseworker in Lexington after I got transferred. She said she'd forward the information to Harlan County. I don't know if she ever did. Nobody ever called me back." "Would you be willing to give a statement to investigators?" "Yes," Alicia said immediately. "If it helps." "If it stops him." "It will," Gideon said. "Both." Halftone called Gideon over to Wendell's van 20 minutes later. The vehicle was still parked in the equipment area. Dark green Ford Transit, tinted rear windows, Harlan County Community Services decal on the side. "Doors were unlocked," Halftone said. "I didn't touch anything inside. But look." He pointed. On the passenger floor, well, a black Pelican case, combination lock, sitting in plain sight. "We need a warrant for that," Gideon said. "Already called it in," Crowbar said, appearing from the other side of the van. "Judge Kellum is issuing one now. Should have it in 20 minutes." Gideon looked at the case. Whatever was inside, That was the evidence that would connect the dots. He could feel it. They waited. The fairground had mostly cleared out. Parents had taken their children home early. Vendors were packing up. The music had stopped. What had started as a community celebration had become a crime scene. Judge Kellum's warrant arrived via email at 5:47 p.m. Deputy Harris opened the Pelican case with gloved hands, halftone filming every second. Inside, 6 manila folders, each labeled with a child's first name only: Sophie, Marcus, Elena, Tommy, Sarah, David. Harris opened Sophie's folder. 23 pages, 11 days of notes, her schedule, her grandfather's schedule, her preferences, her responses to the gift protocol, clinical, methodical, the language of a predator documenting his work. Tommy's folder was thicker. 41 pages, timeline spanning 14 months, notes on his school schedule, his vulnerabilities, his counselor meetings, and a handwritten note dated June 12, 2021, 2 days before Tommy drowned. Escalation risk. Meeting scheduled June 16th. Contingency required. Harris looked at Gideon. We're going to need to bring in the state. Maybe the FBI. Already on it, Crowbar said. Also in the case, a prepaid smartphone. Not Wendell's work phone. A second phone. Encrypted messaging app. 14 contacts listed by symbols, not names. Halftone took the phone. I can crack this. Give me 2 hours. The room went quiet when the scope of it became clear. 6 children, 6 folders, documentation spanning years, a network that went beyond one predator in one county. Gideon stood in the middle of the fairground, surrounded by his brothers, and felt the weight of what they'd uncovered. This wasn't just about Sophie. This wasn't even just about Tommy. This was systemic. The brothers regrouped at the Clover Hollow Clubhouse at 7:30 p.m. The building was a converted garage on the edge of town. Cinder block, steel door, 1 window with bars. Inside, a long wooden table, mismatched chairs, a refrigerator that hummed too loud, and a wall covered in chapter photos going back 3 decades. Halftone set up his laptop at the head of the table. The encrypted phone sat beside it, connected via USB. Code scrolled across the screen as his software worked to break the encryption. 23 men sat around the table, silent, waiting. Sophie was in the back room with Faye, both of them under Razorback's watch, safe, out of earshot. Talk to me, Gideon said. Halftone pulled up a spreadsheet. Wendell's financial records. I pulled them from the county database. Technically legal since they're public employee salary information, cross-referenced with property records and business filings. He rotated the laptop so everyone could see. Wendell's listed income: $54,000 from the county, $12,000 annual stipend from the church. Total, $66,000 a year. He's been at that rate for 6 years. Halftone clicked to the next screen. Here's his actual spending over the past 19 months. 2023 Ram 1500 Longhorn pickup, cash purchase, $61,400. Deposit on lakefront property at Laurel River Lake, $47,200. Church youth program donations, which I'm betting are social capital investments, $8,400. Total documented frivolous spending in under 2 years, $117,000. Crowbar leaned forward. On a $66,000 annual salary. Exactly, Halftone said. So where did the money come from? He pulled up another document. Bank statements for an LLC registered in Wendell's wife's maiden name, Harlan Home Support Services. Monthly deposits, $2,400. 6 separate deposits per month. $14,400 total per month. Deposits started 19 months ago. Total deposited over that period, $273,600. The room was silent. What's the source? Cinder asked. Foster care placement stipends, Halftone said. As placement coordinator, Wendell approves and administers foster family payments. The state sends the money to the county. The county distributes it to approved foster families. But Wendell created 6 phantom placements, children listed as placed with approved families who either don't exist or aren't providing care. He redirected the stipend payments to his own LLC. How long has this been running? Gideon asked. 19 months. First phantom placement created November 2023. Gideon's jaw tightened. 6 placements times $2,400 a month times 19 months. That's the $273,000. Correct, Halftone said. But here's the thing. Those 6 phantom placements? The names match the 6 folders we found in his van. Sophie, Marcus, Elena, Tommy, Sarah, David. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a motorcycle idled and cut off. And every man in that room understood, without saying it out loud, that they weren't just trying to save Sophie. They were trying to stop something that had already killed before. Cinder opened Tommy's folder again. The pages were worn, like they'd been reviewed multiple times. He found what he was looking for on page 34. An insurance document, life insurance policy on Thomas Edward Harkins, policyholder and beneficiary, Wendell Ray Pruitt, legal guardian. Policy amount, $25,000. Date issued, February 14th, 2021. Date of Tommy's death, June 14th, 2021. 4 months. Cinder turned the page. Behind the policy was a payout confirmation. Criminal Injury Compensation Fund. Victim, Thomas Edward Harkins, age 14, accidental drowning. Beneficiary, Wendell Ray Pruitt, legal guardian. Amount paid, $89,000. Date paid, August 6th, 2021. Total, $114,000. For a child who'd asked to speak to his school counselor 2 days before he drowned. There's another one, Halftone said quietly. He pulled up a second insurance document he'd found in the county records database. Older. Policy on Margaret Pruitt, Wendell's late wife. Cause of death listed as complications from pneumonia. Date of death, January 18th, 2020. Policy amount, $180,000. Date policy was issued, November 9th, 2019. 2 months before she died. He's done this twice before, Cinder said. His voice was flat. At least? Gideon looked around the table. We need to find the other children. Marcus, Elena, Sarah, David. If they're still alive, they're in danger. If they're not, we need to know. Crowbar pulled out his phone. I'll coordinate with state CPS. Get a full audit of Wendell's placement records going back 5 years. And we need to talk to whoever signed off on Wendell's expenses, Gideon said. The Church Benevolence Fund. Someone approved $8,400 in program expenses with no receipts. Someone looked the other way. I know who, Gravel said. Sandra Briley. She was on the Benevolence Committee 2 years ago. Raised questions about Wendell's expense reports. Got voted off the committee 3 months later. Find her, Gideon said. We need her testimony. Sandra Briley lived 4 miles outside Clover Hollow, in a single-wide trailer with a garden that produced more tomatoes than one person could eat. She answered the door at 8:15 p.m., suspicious until she saw Gravel standing on her steps. What do you want? She asked. Wendell Pruitt was arrested this afternoon, Gravel said. We need to know what you know. Sandra's face went pale, then hard. Come in. She led them to a kitchen table covered in crossword puzzles and a half-finished cup of tea. She pulled a file box from under the sink. I kept copies, she said. When I raised questions about Wendell's expense reports, I was told I was being difficult, that Wendell had impeccable judgment, that I should trust the process. She opened the box. So I kept every document that didn't add up. Inside, 2 years of expense reports, $8,400 in total, labeled program expenses across 14 separate line items. No receipts, no itemization, just Wendell's signature and a notation. Approved for benevolence fund disbursement. I asked for backup documentation, Sandra said. Wendell said the expenses were for gift cards and supplies for families in need. Privacy concerns prevented him from naming recipients. The committee accepted that explanation. I didn't. What happened when you pushed? Gideon asked. I was asked to step down. Told my skepticism was creating division. The committee voted to accept Wendell's assurances going forward without requiring receipts. Sandra looked at Gideon. What did he do? Groomed children, defrauded the foster care system, and we're looking at 2 suspicious deaths connected to insurance payouts. Sandra closed her eyes. I knew something was wrong. I just couldn't prove it. You can now, Gideon said. Will you testify? Yes, Sandra said immediately. Whatever you need. Halftone's laptop beeped at 9:47 p.m. The encryption had cracked. The messaging app opened. 14 contacts. No names. Just symbols. Halftone scrolled through the message history. His face went pale. We need the FBI, he said. Right now. Gideon looked at the screen. The messages were coded, but the pattern was clear. Dates, locations, ages, prices. This wasn't just one predator. This was a network. Special Agent Caroline Voss arrived at the clubhouse at 11:20 p.m. She was 46 years old, plain clothes, practical. No performance of authority. She looked tired in a way that coffee no longer touched. She showed her credentials at the door. Crowbar let her in. Agent Voss, she said. Gideon nodded. Tombstone Mercer. I'm told you have something relevant to an open federal investigation. Depends on what you're investigating. Wendell Ray Pruitt. Gideon looked at his brothers. A decision was made without words. How long has your office known about Wendell? Gideon asked. Agent Voss's expression didn't change, but something in her posture shifted. 4 months. We've been building a case. Financial fraud. Placement irregularities. We needed to ensure the evidence was solid before we moved. 4 months, Gideon said quietly. We got Sophie out in 43 minutes. The statement hung in the air. Agent Voss had no good response, and Gideon could see in her face that she knew it. We had to build the case legally, she said, by the book. While you built it, children were inside that system, Gideon said. His voice was calm, not accusatory, just factual. Your process is designed to protect the integrity of prosecution. Our process is designed to protect the child. Both matter, but when they conflict, we choose the child. Agent Voss was quiet for a moment. Then, show me what you have. Gideon laid out the evidence piece by piece, the hand-drawn map, the voice recording, the 6 folders from Wendell's van, the financial records showing $273,000 in fraudulent foster care payments, the insurance policies on Tommy Harkins and Margaret Pruitt, the encrypted phone with 14 contacts. Agent Voss reviewed each item. She stopped writing halfway through, set her pen down, leaned forward. This fills a gap we haven't been able to close for 3 months, she said. We had the financial trail. We didn't have the direct evidence linking the children to the fraud. She looked at the encrypted phone. And we certainly didn't have this. If this is authenticated, she continued, it changes the scope of the charges significantly. This isn't just local fraud. This is organized trafficking. What do you need from us? Gideon asked. Full cooperation, witness statements, chain of custody documentation for all evidence. Agent Voss paused. And I need the girl. Faye Decker. Her testimony is critical. Faye gets a victim advocate assigned before any interview, Gideon said. And nobody talks to her without her asking first. Non-negotiable. Agent Voss studied him. Agreed. One more thing, Gideon said. The second arrest. The names on that encrypted phone. They happened today, not after another week of paperwork. Warrants are already being prepared, Agent Voss said. Coordinated arrests across 4 counties will happen within 48 hours. 48 hours, Gideon repeated. That's the job. Agent Voss stood to leave. Gideon walked her to the door. Agent Voss, she turned. You do right by her. By all of them. A beat. That's the job, she said again. But this time, it sounded like a promise. After Agent Voss left, Gideon sat alone at the table. His brothers had dispersed, some heading home, some staying to maintain the watch rotation on Sophie and Faye. The clubhouse was quiet except for the refrigerator's hum. Halftone appeared in the doorway. Final count, he said. The encrypted phone had transaction records going back 22 months. 14 separate contacts across 4 counties. Based on the message frequency and coded language, we're estimating between 18 and 24 victims, ages ranging from 6 to 14. Gideon closed his eyes. The state CPS audit came back, Halftone continued. 3 of the 6 names from Wendell's folders are confirmed missing. Marcus Williams, age 11, listed as transferred 9 months ago. No receiving county on file. Elena Rodriguez, age 9, listed as placement disruption 14 months ago. No follow-up documentation. David Chen, age 7, listed as parental reunification 6 months ago. No verification that reunification occurred. And Sarah? Gideon asked. Sarah Mathis, age 12, found safe in a Lexington placement. She was transferred out of Wendell's jurisdiction 18 months ago after her foster mother reported concerns. The report was dismissed, but the foster mother requested transfer anyway. Sarah's alive because one person wouldn't let it go. One person. One stubborn foster mother who refused to be dismissed. One child saved because someone cared more about being right than being liked. We'll find the others, Halftone said. I know, Gideon said, but we should have found them sooner. The system wasn't broken. That was the thing people got wrong. A broken system could be fixed. This one worked exactly as designed, built to move slowly, to require proof beyond doubt, to protect the rights of the accused even at the cost of the victim's time. Nobody built it to be cruel. It just turned out that way sometimes, when the person inside it needed saving faster than the paperwork could catch up. The brothers hadn't replaced the system. They'd bought the time the system needed to work. But the cost of that time, the children who'd waited while bureaucracy turned its wheels, that wait didn't disappear just because justice eventually came. At 1:34 a.m., the full scope was clear. Victim count, 18 to 24, confirmed or suspected over 22 months. Dollar amounts, $273,600 in foster care fraud, plus $114,000 insurance payout. Tommy, plus $180,000 insurance payout. Margaret Pruitt, equals $567,600 total. Timeline, network operating since November 2023. Charges, federal and state. Organized trafficking of minors, federal foster care fraud, state felony. Insurance fraud, state felony. Child endangerment, multiple counts, state felony. Filing false documents, state felony. Wire fraud, federal. Wendell Ray Pruitt was arraigned at 9 a.m. the following morning. Bail was set at $500,000. A man who'd stolen nearly $600,000 and had nothing legitimate to show for it wouldn't be making bail anytime soon. Coordinated arrests across 4 counties happened within 36 hours. 8 additional suspects taken into custody. The network dismantled piece by piece. And in a church shelter in Clover Hollow, a 12-year-old girl with a pencil and a notebook slept in a real bed for the first time in 7 months, knowing that when she woke up, someone would still be there. 3 days after Wendell's arrest, Cinder drove Faye to Harlan County Medical Center for a full examination. Not because she'd been physically harmed, she hadn't, but because 7 months of sleeping in church shelters and behind buildings, and sometimes in drainage culverts, meant her body had stories to tell that she'd never spoken aloud. Cinder sat in the waiting room with a thermos of coffee and a book he wasn't reading. He'd brought something else, too. A small paper bag with a cinnamon roll from the bakery on Main Street. He'd noticed she never took food when it was offered directly. Too much pride, or too much practice refusing things she couldn't repay. But if he left it on the table beside her with a casual, "got an extra one," she'd eat it when she thought he wasn't looking. The examination took 40 minutes. When Faye came out, she looked smaller somehow, like the medical poking and prodding had reminded her body of every place it had learned to hurt. The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense hands, handed Cinder a folder. She didn't open it in front of Faye. She just said, "Malnutrition, moderate, anemia, some old bruising, healed fractures in 2 fingers that set wrong. Nothing acute. She'll need follow-up in 30 days, blood work to check iron levels, and I'm recommending weekly counseling sessions." The doctor looked at Faye. "You're stronger than you should have to be," she said quietly. "But you don't have to be that strong anymore. Do you understand?" Faye nodded. She didn't trust her voice. As they walked to the parking lot, Cinder said, "You did good in there." "I didn't do anything, I just sat there." "You showed up. That's more than most people manage." He unlocked the truck. "You hungry?" "I ate the cinnamon roll." "I know. I'm asking if you want lunch." Faye looked at him. Really looked. Like she was still trying to figure out if kindness was a trick or a trap. "Yeah," she said finally. "I'm hungry." They ate at a diner 3 blocks from the hospital. Faye ordered a grilled cheese and tomato soup. Cinder watched her eat, not staring, just checking. She didn't watch the door. She didn't scan the room every 30 seconds. She just ate. That was progress. Sophie's first therapy session happened the same week. Gideon drove her to a small office on the 2nd floor of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner and lavender. The therapist's name was Dr. Lin. She was 42, Vietnamese American, and had worked with child trauma cases for 16 years. She didn't ask Sophie to talk about what happened. Not right away. Instead, she asked Sophie to draw. "Draw anything you want," Dr. Lin said. "Doesn't have to be good. Doesn't have to make sense. Just draw what you're feeling." Sophie drew a girl in a yellow dress standing in the middle of a fairground. Around her, dark scribbles. Above her, a bright blue sky with yellow sun. "Tell me about this," Dr. Lin said. Sophie pointed to the dark scribbles. "That's the bad stuff, the stuff I didn't see coming." "And the sky." "That's Grandpa, and Faye." "And the brothers. They're bigger than the bad stuff." Dr. Lin nodded. She didn't say, "Good job," or "You're so brave." She just said, "That's true. They are bigger." After the session, Gideon asked Dr. Lin how long recovery would take. "There's no timeline," Dr. Lin said. "She's 8 years old. She was groomed for 11 days. That's not a small thing. But she has you. She has stability. She has people who believed her immediately and acted. Those are the factors that matter most. She'll carry this, but it won't define her. Not if we do this right." Gideon nodded. He didn't ask what doing it right looked like. He figured he'd learn as they went. Housing for Faye took longer to arrange. The system wanted to place her back in foster care. Gideon fought it. She ran from a placement where she was abused, he told the caseworker assigned to Faye's case, a woman named Monica Reeves, who was new to the county and hadn't yet learned to dismiss inconvenient truths. She reported it. Nobody believed her. You send her back into that system without safeguards, and you'll lose her again. This time, maybe for good. Monica looked at Faye's file. 4 placements in 26 months, 3 incident reports, 0 substantiated findings. "What are you proposing?" Monica asked. "Kinship placement," Gideon said. "She stays with me and Sophie until we can find a permanent solution that she feels safe in." "You're not a licensed foster parent." "Then license me." It took 8 days of paperwork, a home inspection, and a background check that came back so clean it surprised even Gideon. On October 31st, Faye moved into the spare bedroom in Gideon's house. The room had a window that looked out on the backyard, a bed that didn't fold up, and a door that locked from the inside. Razorback helped carry her things in. She didn't have much: the clothes donated by the church shelter, the notebook with her observations, the pencil she still carried everywhere, and the voice recorder that had been logged as evidence, but returned to her after copies were made. "This is yours," Gideon said, handing her a key. "Front door. You come and go as you need. No curfew as long as you tell me where you'll be. House rules are simple. Respect each other. Clean up after yourself. And if something's wrong, you say it out loud. We don't do secrets here." Faye took the key. It was small and brass and felt heavier than it should. "What if I mess up?" she asked. "Then we figure it out," Gideon said. "That's what family does." The word family landed in a way neither of them expected. Faye's eyes went wet. She turned away, pretending to look at the room, giving herself time to pull it back together. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You saved my granddaughter's life," Gideon said. "This doesn't even come close to even." The Clover Hollow chapter raised $42,000 in 6 weeks. Donations came from all over, chapters in Tennessee, West Virginia, Ohio. People who'd never met Sophie or Faye, but understood what it meant when a child needed help, and adults actually answered. The money went into a trust, half for Faye's education, half for Sophie's future, managed by Crowbar, who'd made it clear that every penny would be accounted for, and anyone who tried to touch it for anything other than the girl's benefit would answer to him, personally. The community integration happened slowly. Sophie returned to school 3 weeks after Wendell's arrest. She was quieter than before, more careful about who she trusted, but she still laughed at recess, still raised her hand in class, still wore yellow ribbons in her hair, because they reminded her of her grandmother, and nobody got to take that away from her. Faye enrolled at Millard Creek Middle School in November. 7th grade. She was behind in math, ahead in reading, and had the kind of street-smart intelligence that couldn't be taught in a classroom. Her teachers noticed she never threw anything away. Every pencil stub, every scrap of paper, every handout got saved in her backpack, like it might be the last one she'd ever get. By December, she'd stopped doing that, started using the school supplies like they'd always be there, started believing that maybe they would. Halftone set up a laptop in Gideon's living room one Saturday in late November and showed Faye and Sophie something he'd been working on. "It's a database," he said. "Warning signs of grooming. Resources for kids who need help. Anonymous reporting system. I'm calling it the Guardian Network. and I want you two to help me build it." "How?" Sophie asked. "Tell me what you wish you'd known," Halftone said. "What would have helped you recognize what was happening sooner?" Sophie thought about it. "I didn't know gifts could be bad. I thought if someone was nice and gave me things, that meant they cared." "Okay, so we add a section. When gifts become grooming." "What else?" Faye spoke up. "I knew what was happening. I just couldn't get anyone to listen." "There should be a way to report that doesn't require an adult to believe you first." "Anonymous youth reporting line," Halftone said, typing. "Calls go directly to trained advocates, not the same system that failed you. What else?" They spent 2 hours building the framework. By the end, it wasn't just Halftone's project anymore. It was theirs. The Guardian Network went live in March. Within 6 months, it had been adopted by 3 other counties. Within a year, it had logged 273 reports and led to 11 investigations that resulted in arrests. Faye's map, the hand-drawn pencil sketch that had started everything, became the site's logo. No names, just the lines and timestamps and the 3 circled words. Alone. Gift. Secret. On a cold February morning, 4 months after Wendell's arrest, Gravel stopped by Gideon's house with a newspaper. The headline read, "Pruitt sentenced to 23 years in federal prison." The article detailed the trial. 3 days. Less than 2 hours of jury deliberation. The evidence presented: financial records, encrypted phone messages, testimony from Sandra Briley about the fraudulent expense reports, testimony from Alicia Ferris about Tommy Harkins, testimony from Paulette Owens about the dismissed complaint 14 months prior, and testimony from Faye Decker, 12 years old, steady voice, hand-drawn map, voice recording. 3 days of documented observations. The judge had called her the most credible witness I have seen in 26 years on the bench. Sentencing: 23 years federal prison. No parole eligibility for 18 years. Restitution ordered. $567,600 to be paid to victims and the state. A restraining order barred Wendell from contact with any of the identified victims for life. It wasn't enough. 23 years couldn't undo what he'd done. But it was something. It was consequences. It was the system finally working the way it was supposed to. Gideon read the article twice. Then he folded the paper and set it on the counter. "You okay?" Gravel asked. "I keep thinking about the ones we didn't save," Gideon said. "Marcus, Elena, David. 3 kids still missing. Tommy, who didn't make it. Margaret Pruitt, who nobody questioned when she died." "You can't save everyone," Gravel said. "I know. Doesn't make it easier." Gravel was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what makes it easier? The ones you did save. Sophie's in 3rd grade getting A's. Faye's building a reporting system that's already helping kids in 3 counties. You gave them a future. That counts." Gideon nodded. It did count. He just wished the ledger balanced. 6 months after Wendell's sentencing, Crowbar called a chapter meeting. 23 brothers gathered at the clubhouse. Gideon stood at the head of the table. "I want to make this permanent," Gideon said. "Not a one-time thing. Not something we do when it lands in our lap. I want us to be the people kids come to when the system fails them." "What are you proposing?" Crowbar asked. "A program, Angel's Watch, partnered with local schools, shelters, community centers. We train our brothers on recognizing signs of abuse. We create safe reporting channels. We coordinate with law enforcement and social services, but we don't wait for them to move. We act when a child needs help, and we deal with the paperwork after." Cinder spoke up. "The liability exposure on that is significant." "I know," Gideon said. "That's why we do it right. documentation, legal oversight, transparency. We don't replace the system. We hold it accountable. The room was quiet. 23 men considering what it meant to turn one desperate act into a structured commitment. "All in favor?" Gideon asked. For a moment, nothing. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then every single hand went up. Not a moment's hesitation. Not a single dissenting voice. 23 men voting unanimously to help children they'd never met because they'd seen what happened when nobody else did. Angel's Watch became official in September. 3 other chapters across Kentucky adopted the model within a year. It wasn't perfect. It couldn't save everyone. But it saved some. And some was better than none. But this story isn't really about bikers or programs, or even justice. It's about what happens when one person decides that a child's safety matters more than convenience, more than comfort, more than staying out of trouble. It's about Faye Decker, who had every reason to stay invisible and chose to be seen. It's about Gideon Mercer, who looked scary enough to dismiss and kind enough to listen. It's about a system that fails more often than it should, and the people who refuse to let that failure be the end of the story. Gideon hadn't planned to stop by the house that evening. He'd been at the clubhouse, late, working on Angel's Watch protocols with Crowbar, and the route home took him past his own street. The porch light was on. That was normal. But there was something else, a sound that made him slow the bike and pull into the driveway, quietly. Laughter. Not the careful, controlled kind. Real laughter. The kind that came from a place deeper than performance. He cut the engine and walked around to the back of the house. Through the kitchen window he could see them. Sophie at the table, homework spread out in front of her, yellow ribbon slightly crooked in her left braid, because she'd tied it herself that morning and refused help. Faye sat across from her, a textbook open, explaining something with her hands. The pencil was tucked behind her ear, not being held defensively, just resting there because that's where pencils go when you're not using them. Sophie said something Gideon couldn't hear. Faye laughed, and the sound was so unexpected, so unguarded, that it made Gideon's chest tight. He'd heard Faye speak many times in the 4 months since she'd walked up to him at that fairground. He'd heard her testify in court with a steady voice that carried more weight than some adults managed in a lifetime. He'd heard her navigate social workers and therapists and the endless bureaucracy of a system that still didn't quite know what to do with a kid who refused to be quiet. But he'd never heard her laugh like that, like someone who believed good things could happen without a cost attached. He watched for another minute. Sophie struggled with a math problem. Faye leaned over, pointed to something on the page. Sophie's face brightened with understanding. They both bent over the homework again, Sophie's small hand moving across the paper, Faye's hand guiding without taking over. Gideon turned away from the window, walked to his bike, stood there in the cold February air with his hands in his pockets. He thought about the 407 case files he'd processed in 6 years at CPS, the children whose names he'd forgotten because there were too many to remember, the ones he'd tried to help within the constraints of a system built for paperwork instead of people, the ones who'd fallen through the cracks because he'd been required to follow procedure instead of instinct. He pulled a small stone from his pocket, smooth river rock, worn by water, collected from Clover Creek 3 months back. He'd been carrying it since the day Wendell was sentenced. He didn't know why. Maybe because it was something solid to hold when the weight of what they'd stopped and what they'd missed felt too abstract to carry. He closed his fingers around it, felt the cold surface warm against his palm. Then he put it back in his pocket and climbed onto his bike. He didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there, listening to the sound of laughter through the kitchen window and the distant rumble of traffic on the highway, and the wind moving through bare trees. Some victories were loud. This one was quiet. And maybe that was better. Faye Decker had stopped counting the days since she'd left the Decker home. She'd stopped counting the days since she'd slept in a church shelter. She'd stopped counting rejections, missed meals, nights spent wondering if anyone would notice if she disappeared. She'd started counting different days since she'd enrolled at Millard Creek High School, 212. Days since she'd made honor roll, 94. Days since she'd stopped checking to see if the front door was still unlocked from the inside, 67. And today, April 14th, a Tuesday that felt like any other Tuesday until it wasn't, marked a new count. Day 1 as a peer advocate. The program was run through the school counseling office. Trained students available during lunch and after school for peers who needed someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't an adult. Someone who understood what it felt like to need help and not know how to ask for it. Faye had applied in February. The application asked, "Why do you want to be a peer advocate?" She'd written 3 words, "Because nobody was." The interview was more extensive. The school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, had asked the hard questions. "You've been through significant trauma yourself. Are you ready to carry someone else's?" Faye had thought about it. Really thought. "I don't know if anyone's ever ready," she'd said. "But I know what it feels like to talk and have nobody hear you. I know what it costs. If I can be the person who hears someone, even just one person, that's worth whatever it costs me." Mrs. Patterson had approved her application on the spot. Today was her first shift. Lunch period, room 214B. Door open. Sign on the wall. Peer advocates. Safe space. Confidential. 3 students came in during that 40-minute window. The first was a sophomore girl who needed help navigating a friendship conflict. Straightforward. Faye listened, asked questions, offered perspective without judgment. The second was a junior boy struggling with college applications and family pressure. Deeper, but still within normal territory. The third was a freshman girl named Mia, who stood in the doorway for 2 full minutes before coming inside. She had the look, the one Faye recognized because she'd seen it in mirrors and reflections and photos of herself from 2 years back. Hypervigilant, but controlled. Eyes that scanned the room and logged exits before anything else. Faye waited. Didn't rush her. Didn't ask what was wrong. Just sat there, present, patient. "Is it really confidential?" Mia asked finally. "Unless you're in immediate danger, or someone else is," Faye said. "Then I have to report to Mrs. Patterson. But I'm not required to report to your parents or anyone else without your permission." Mia nodded, came inside, closed the door. "My mom's boyfriend," she said. "He doesn't hit me or anything, but the way he looks at me is wrong, and he keeps buying me things, clothes, jewelry, says it's because he wants me to feel special." Faye's hands went cold. Alone. Gift. Secret. "Does he give you these gifts privately?" Faye asked. "Yeah. Says it's between us. Says my mom wouldn't understand." "Has he asked you to keep it secret from your mom?" "Not in those words, but yeah. That's what he means." Faye looked at this girl, 14 years old, same age Faye had been when she'd finally run from the Decker home, and saw a version of herself standing at a crossroads. "This is grooming," Faye said quietly. "What he's doing has a name, and that name is grooming. And it escalates. Always." Mia's face went pale. "I thought maybe I was imagining it." "You're not. Your instincts are right. The way he looks at you is wrong. The gifts with secret conditions are wrong. The isolation is wrong. All of it." "What do I do?" "We tell Mrs. Patterson. Today. Right now. And we make a plan to keep you safe." "My mom won't believe me," Then we find people who will. I didn't have that. But you do. You have me. And I'm not letting this go." Mia started crying. Not loud. Just quiet tears that came from a place of relief and terror mixed together. The feeling of being believed and being terrified of what comes next. Faye didn't tell her it would be okay. She didn't make promises she couldn't keep. She just said, "You did the hardest part already. You told someone. The rest, we do together." Mrs. Patterson made the call to CPS that afternoon. The caseworker who responded was Monica Reeves, the same woman who'd approved Faye's kinship placement 18 months prior. Monica had learned, in those 18 months, that listening to kids who sounded crazy sometimes meant catching the truth before it killed someone. She took Mia's statement seriously. She filed the report immediately. She coordinated with law enforcement for a safety plan. Mia was removed from the home that night. Emergency placement with her aunt in Lexington. Her mother's boyfriend was interviewed by police. No charges filed yet. Not enough evidence, but a formal investigation opened. Faye got a text from Monica 3 days later. "Mia's safe. Thank you for hearing what others missed." Faye showed the text to Gideon that night at dinner. "You did good," he said. "I just listened." "That's the thing people don't understand," Gideon said. "Sometimes listening is the whole job." The Angels Watch program had expanded to 7 counties by then. Documented intervention count, 43 cases in 18 months. 11 resulted in arrests. 24 resulted in family interventions and safety plans without criminal charges. 8 resulted in children being removed from dangerous situations before physical harm occurred. The program's motto, printed on every badge and poster: "We hear you. We believe you. We act." Faye had helped write that motto. Statistical data collected by the program showed a 78% increase in early reporting of suspected abuse in participating schools. Counselors attributed it directly to peer advocates and the Angels Watch presence in the community. "People are more willing to speak up when they know someone's listening," one counselor told a local news station. "And kids are more willing to report when they see other kids like Faye Decker, proving that speaking up works." Faye's name had become known. Not famous, but known. The girl who'd stopped a predator with a pencil and a map. The girl who'd testified in federal court at 13. The girl who'd turned her survival into a system that protected others. She wasn't comfortable with the attention, but she understood it served a purpose. If her story made one more kid believe they could speak up, that was worth the discomfort. Razorback stopped by the high school one afternoon in May, asked Faye if she wanted to grab coffee. They sat at a corner table in the town's only coffee shop, the kind of place that served mediocre drip coffee in chipped mugs, and had been there longer than most of the buildings around it. "I wanted to check in," Razorback said. "See how you're doing. Really doing. Not the version you give adults who ask." Faye stirred her coffee. "I'm okay. Most days." "What about the other days?" "The other days I remember that I got out, that I'm safe, that I have a home and a school and people who care. And I remember that there are kids who don't have that, who are still inside what I escaped from, and it feels wrong to be okay when they're not." "Survivor's guilt," Razorback said. "Is that what this is?" "Yeah. It's the weight of being the one who made it out. It doesn't go away, but it gets easier to carry." Faye nodded. "Mia, the girl I helped last month, she sent me a letter, said I saved her life, but all I did was listen and make a phone call. That doesn't feel like saving someone." "That's because you're thinking about saving like it's some big dramatic moment," Razorback said. "Most of the time, saving someone looks like showing up and giving a damn when nobody else will. You did that. That's not small." Faye was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you think we're making a difference?" "Really?" "I know we are. 43 cases, Faye. 43 kids who got help because you proved it was possible to fight back. Razorback took a sip of his terrible coffee. You're not just surviving anymore. You're teaching others how to survive. That's the thing predators fear most. Victims who refuse to stay silent. Faye Decker was 19 years old when she walked into the Harlan County Department of Social Services for her first day as a CPS intake specialist intern. She'd graduated high school with honors, full scholarship to Eastern Kentucky University, majored in social work with a focus on child welfare, graduated summa cum laude, applied for the internship the week after commencement. The woman who interviewed her was Monica Reeves, now the county CPS director. You know this job will break your heart, Monica had said during the interview. I know, Faye replied, but I also know what happens when nobody does it. Monica hired her on the spot. On her third week, Faye was assigned a case. Suspected abuse. Anonymous tip called in through the Angels Watch hotline. A 10-year-old boy named Marcus. Schoolteacher noticed bruising, withdrawn behavior, sudden drop in grades. Faye drove to the school, met with the teacher first, a young woman, mid-20s, who'd filed 3 incident reports over 2 months and received no response. I kept calling, the teacher said. Nobody came. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. You weren't wrong, Faye said. And you're not overreacting. Tell me everything. The teacher pulled out a folder. Documentation. Photos of bruises taken with parental consent for medical records. Timeline of behavioral changes. Notes from conversations where Marcus had hinted at things, but never said them directly. It was meticulous, professional, and it had been sitting in a filing system for 8 weeks. Faye felt something familiar rise in her chest. Anger, not at the teacher, at the system that had taught people that filing reports was enough, that documentation mattered more than action. I'm going to talk to Marcus, Faye said, today, and then I'm going to make sure someone does something about this, not next week, not after the paperwork clears, today. She found Marcus at recess, sitting alone on a bench near the playground. He had the look she knew too well. She sat down beside him, didn't introduce herself as CPS, just said, I'm Faye. I heard you might need someone to talk to. Marcus looked at her. Suspicious. Who told you that? Your teacher. She's worried about you. I'm fine. That's what I used to say too, Faye said. When I wasn't fine. When I was the opposite of fine. But I didn't know how to tell anyone without making it worse. Marcus was quiet. Can I show you something? Faye asked. She pulled out her phone, pulled up a photo of a piece of paper, the hand-drawn map she'd made 6 years ago, the one that had started everything. I made this when I was 12, Faye said. I was trying to stop someone from hurting a little girl. I showed it to 4 different adults. None of them believed me, but the 5th one did. And that changed everything. Marcus stared at the map, at the circled words, alone, gift, secret. What happened to the person you were trying to stop? Marcus asked. He went to prison, 23 years, and the little girl, she's safe now. She's in high school. She's okay. Because of you. Because I kept trying until someone listened. Faye looked at him. Marcus, if something's happening at home that scares you or hurts you, I need you to know that I'm going to listen. And I'm not going to stop until you're safe. That's a promise. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. My dad says if I tell anyone, he'll hurt my mom. And there it was, the secret that had been killing this boy from the inside. Okay, Faye said. Her voice was calm, steady. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk inside together. We're going to talk to someone who can help. And we're going to make a safety plan that protects both you and your mom. Your dad doesn't get to hurt either of you anymore. Do you trust me? Marcus nodded. Good, because I've been where you are, and I know the way out. The emergency custody order was issued within 4 hours. Marcus and his mother were placed in a protective shelter by that evening. Marcus's father was arrested for felony domestic violence and child endangerment. Bail set at $150,000. Faye sat with Marcus and his mother at the shelter that night, explaining what came next. Court dates, counseling, housing assistance, the long, slow process of rebuilding a life from the pieces left behind by violence. Marcus's mother, a woman in her 30s who looked 50 from the weight of what she'd carried, looked at Faye with something like awe. "How did you know?" she asked. "How did you know he was telling the truth?" "Because someone saw the truth in me when I needed it most," Faye said. "And because I know what it looks like when a child is carrying a secret that's too heavy to hold alone." Monica called Faye into her office 2 days later. "I read your case notes on the Marcus file," Monica said. "You moved faster than anyone I've seen. 4-hour turnaround from initial contact to emergency custody. That's unheard of." "He needed help today, not next week," Faye said. "I agree. But you need to understand, most cases don't resolve that cleanly. Most of the time, you'll do everything right, and it still won't be enough. The system is slow. Resources are limited. You can't save everyone." "I know," Faye said, "but I can save some, and some is better than none." Monica smiled. It was a tired smile, the smile of someone who'd fought the same fight for 20 years and was still fighting. "You're going to be excellent at this job," Monica said, "and it's going to break your heart. Are you ready for that?" Faye thought about Sophie, who was now in high school and thriving. She thought about Mia, who was safe with her aunt and doing well in therapy. She thought about Marcus, who'd slept through the night for the first time in 2 years because he finally believed someone stronger than his father was protecting him. "I'm ready," Faye said. Gideon stood in the Millard Creek Elementary School hallway on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, 7 years after the day Faye had walked up to him at that fairground. He wasn't supposed to be there. He'd just finished dropping Sophie off at her college dorm 3 hours away. Full scholarship, pre-med program, plans to become a pediatrician. She'd hugged him before he left, whispered, "Thank you for everything," and he'd managed to make it to his truck before his eyes went wet. On the drive back, he'd passed the elementary school and saw the sign, Angels Watch Community Open House, 3 to 5 p.m. He pulled in without thinking. The school had dedicated a wing to abuse prevention education, posters on the walls, resources for kids who needed help, and in the center of the display, under glass in a simple wooden frame, a piece of paper torn from a church bulletin, covered in pencil marks, Faye's map. The label beneath it read, "When one person refuses to look away, everything changes. No names, no explanation, just the map and the circled words, alone, gift, secret." Gideon stood there for a long time. Parents and teachers moved past him, going to classrooms and information sessions. But he didn't move. He just stared at that piece of paper, the thing that had started as evidence and become a symbol. A woman approached him, mid-50s, kind face, name tag that read, Principal Angela Reese. "That's a powerful piece," she said. "Created by a student who saw something wrong and refused to stay silent. She was 12 years old, homeless. Nobody believed her. But she kept going until someone did." "I know," Gideon said quietly. "I was the someone." Angela's expression shifted. "Your tombstone. Gideon Mercer. I've heard the story. Everyone in education around here has. You changed how we think about mandatory reporting, about believing children the first time they speak, not the fourth." Gideon looked at the map again. "She changed it. Not me. I just listened. That's not a small thing. Listening is the whole job. Gideon nodded. He'd heard that before. From Faye, actually. She'd told him the same thing a year ago when he'd asked if he'd done enough. You listened when nobody else would. That's not small. That's everything. He pulled the river rock from his pocket, the same one he'd carried for 7 years now. Smooth, worn by water. A small solid thing to hold when abstract weight felt too heavy. He'd picked it up the day after Wendell's sentencing, carried it every day since. He didn't know why, really. Maybe because it reminded him that even stone changes shape over time. That even the hardest things can be worn down by persistence. Or maybe because it was a promise. A reminder that as long as he could hold this rock, he could hold the weight of the children he hadn't saved alongside the children he had. He put it back in his pocket. Angela was watching him. You okay? Yeah, Gideon said. I'm just thinking about the kids we didn't get to. The ones who didn't have someone who listened. You can't save everyone, Angela said gently. I know. But every time I save one, I honor the ones I missed. That's all any of us can do. The thing about protection is that it's not a one-time event. It's not a single moment of heroism followed by credits and a happy ending. It's the decision, made over and over, to show up when it would be easier to look away. To listen when it would be simpler to dismiss. To act when inaction carries no consequences for you personally. Gideon Mercer made that decision on a Saturday afternoon in October, when a 12-year-old girl, with a pencil and a map, asked him a question he didn't know the answer to. Faye Decker made that decision every day for 3 days, when she documented a predator's movements instead of staying invisible. And somewhere right now, in a school, a park, a grocery store, a community fair, there's a child who needs someone to make that decision again. If you've ever walked past something that felt wrong, but told yourself it wasn't your business, this story is for you. If you've ever seen a child who seemed scared, but convinced yourself you were imagining things, this story is for you. If you've ever had the chance to speak up and chosen silence because confrontation felt too hard, this story is for you. You don't need 145 motorcycles to change a story. You don't need a leather cut or a president's patch or a chapter of Brothers. You just need to care enough to pay attention, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to listen when a child hesitates, to believe them the first time they speak, not the fourth. That's the thing predators fear most, not police, not punishment, but ordinary people who refuse to be convenient bystanders. So here's what I'm asking. Subscribe to this channel if you believe children deserve adults who show up. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And in the comments, tell me, who was your protector? Or, what do you wish someone had done when you needed help? Because those stories matter. Your voice matters. And if you're the kid who needs help right now, the one watching this alone, wondering if anyone will believe you, I need you to know something. Faye was right. Keep trying until someone listens. The 5th person might be the one, the 10th, the 20th, but someone will hear you. And when they do, everything changes. Because that's what this story proves. That one person with a pencil and the courage to use it can stop evil in its tracks. That scary-looking people can be the gentlest protectors. That the system fails, but people don't have to. More stories like this are coming. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when children need them most. I'll see you in the next one. The Clover Hollow Community Fair still happens every October. The ring toss booth is still there. The food vendors. The carnival music crackling through old speakers. But now, near the entrance, there's a booth staffed by Angels Watch volunteers. A place where kids can report, where parents can ask questions, where the answer to something feels wrong is always, tell me more, instead of, you're probably imagining it. And sometimes, not every year, but sometimes, you can see a young woman with dark auburn hair walking through the fairground with a notebook in her hand. Not documenting predators anymore, just checking, making sure, paying attention. Because Faye Decker learned something that October day 7 years ago. She learned that the scariest-looking man at a fair can become family, that homelessness isn't permanent, that systems fail but people don't have to, that her voice, the one she'd been taught to silence, was the exact thing someone needed to hear. She doesn't carry the pencil anymore, doesn't need to. She has a badge now, official credentials, the authority to do what she'd done at 12, but with the weight of institutions behind her instead of against her. But every October, on the anniversary of the day she walked up to a stranger and asked if he knew where Sophie was. She stops by that elementary school hallway, looks at the map under glass, touches the frame once, and then she goes back to work. Because there are always more Sophies, more Marcuses, more children whose safety depends on someone paying attention. And Faye Decker refuses to look away.